everyone, it's Mari here. I have another project today for honeybee stamps. I'm going to be working with the Build-A-Bot stamp set and companion honey cuts. I'm also going to be using a sentiment from the Gear Up sentiment stamp set, and this also has a companion honey cuts set of dies that go along with it. I am going to be using some paper from the Home Essentials 6x6 paper pad, and I just love this paper pad. I think it really is essential for all sorts of scene building, and I love that paper pad. I'm going to be using a piece of 8.5 by 11 Nina 110 pound cardstock for my base today, and I'm going to be creating a slimline card. So to create that, I'm going to cut my paper at 7 inches and then use that 8.5 width for the rest of my card. So cutting that at 7 inches and then scoring it at 3.5 gives you a card base that looks like this. Just showing you there how it comes off of that part of the paper, and then you have a strip at the bottom that you can use for your card front. So here you can see I've used basically the whole piece of paper for creating my slimline card that I'm going to be creating today. So I'm all ready to go. I've got that card base all set up, and I'm just showing you here how this fits perfectly into a number 10 sized envelope, which is about 4 1/8 by 9.5 inches. And this slimline card just fits beautifully into those number 10 envelopes in that way. You're good to go for envelopes once you've created this card, if you have those on hand. So now I'm going to take some antique linen Distress Oxide ink, and I'm just going to blend that onto my card front. I am using my waffle flower media mat here just so that I don't get my black grid mat all messed up. And now I'm just taking a brick stencil and I'm adding some molding paste onto that panel to create a brick background for the scene that I'm creating today. Now, there is a honeybee stencil that does have the brick on it, and I will link that up in the description box below. I didn't happen to have that stencil, so I just used what I had in my stash. This happens to be a Tim Holtz stencil, but it creates that brick effect, which is what I wanted. And I wanted my little robots to appear to be in a factory working. And you can just see here that I'm just using my Nouveau palette knife here to create some really rough texture on my bricks. I didn't want them to be smooth. And so I took that stencil and I put that across the end of my panel as well, let that dry, and then filled in the center panel as well, using my heat tool to speed up the heating process. Now I'm taking some Rusty Hinge Distress Oxide ink, and I'm just kind of antiquing, giving this sort of like a little bit of an aged look, just to add some detail and make it look a little bit more interesting in that way. Just kind of adding it to the edges of this panel and creating that effect. So just going to quickly do that to that area and then let that dry and move on to the next step. Now I wanted to add some splatters to this brick wall as well. So I'm just going to water down some of that Rusty Hinge with a paintbrush and just splatter that onto my background. I'll sop up that excess moisture with some paper towel, and I'm just going to do that same process with some silver acrylic paint. This happens to be a Vicky Boutin paint. Now I'm going to just use my Memento Tuxedo Black ink to stamp out my images that I'm going to be using here today. I'm using my Mini Misty, and I just put my stamps onto the door of the Misty, inked up those images, and I'm stamping them out on my Nina 80 pound Solar White cardstock. And I'm going to get those all nicely stamped out, and I'm going to do some alcohol ink coloring here with my Ohuhu markers. I'm coloring all of my robot parts with some cool grays, and I didn't do any other color on the robots other than a few little center pieces where they're going to be yellow, and I'm going to color their eyes with yellow too. So just really not too much color to my robots at all. I just wanted them to look like they are mostly made out of metal and just sort of like your classic traditional, what you might think robots might be made out of. And you can just see here, I'm just going in and adding just some darker edges and then blending that out with lighter color. and just some really, really simple blending with 3 different colors of gray. I think I used, and I think I put this up on the screen, C0, C2, and C3, C4, something like that. I think just some really low numbers in those cool grays. I'm also, just like I said, using a little bit of yellows, and now I've got that all done. I've got my card panel all done and ready. And now I'm just going to take the companion dies and I'm going to cut out all of those parts that I have colored. So I'm going to cut out all of the Build-A-Bot parts to create my little robot scene here, my little factory of robots working away, but turns out that they're not just working. So here you can see all of the die cut pieces, and I've sped this up because it could possibly be a little bit boring to watch if it's real time. And you can just see that I'm just going in with my liquid adhesive, and I cut out those pieces that look like strings. What I wanted this to look like is it's sort of like an assembly line that these robots are working on, and they've got this sort of like string behind them that has all the parts that they're grabbing on the assembly line as they're making things. And I'm going to have parts hanging from the assembly line, and then I'm going to have my robots in the foreground, and they're having a little bit of a party when they should be working. So that's what I was going for here with this little scene I'm creating. Now I am going to pop up all of my robot parts on some foam adhesive. You'll just see me adding that adhesive, and that's just going to add some dimension to my card and give it a little bit of pop and realism, make it seem a little bit more 3D. I think that brick wall behind them with that texture paste just kind of really does add some more realism to the card for sure. And I just like adding this little bit of dimension with the foam adhesive to create that as well. So I'm just going to grab these different parts. I really didn't have an idea of what head was going to go with what middle. That's a really cool thing about this stamp set is you can be really creative with what kind of robot you want to make and what the bottom, what the legs will look like and all that sort of thing. And I just had a lot of fun just putting these together and creating these 3 little guys that are just having a great old time in the factory. They're not really working. The idea is that they are programmed to party, and that is the sentiment that is going to be going on this card. So I'm just going to take all of the different arms that I colored and cut out and just kind of put them on here and there. And I'm also going to put a couple of utensils or tools in their hands as well, and you'll see that in a minute. So I did stamp out that Program to Party from the Gear Up stamp set. That's all of the really cool sentiments, and that set does come with and has the companion honey cut so that you can cut out absolutely every one of those sentiments with a die, which is super handy. And you can see that I've done that with the Program to Party there, which I did pop up on some foam adhesive as well. Now I'm just taking all of the other little bits that I have colored and die cut, and I'm just going to place those where I'm going to want them. I'll pop some of those up on adhesive, on foam adhesive, but mostly they'll just be glued down flat to the card. So here you can just see I'm just kind of finishing up eyeballing where I want all these little parts to go, the little tools that are in some of their hands, and the light bulbs, the wind up, whatever you call those winders. They're part of the line of things that are hanging there as well. Now I'm taking the Home Essentials paper and I've cut a couple of strips. I wanted my bots not to look like they're just sort of like suspended in the air. I want them to be standing on some sort of a floor. So this is where that Home Essentials pattern paper comes in. It's really great. I wanted these pieces to kind of look like a cement floor. So I just cut 2 strips, and you can see that of course they're 6 inches, so they're not going to go all the way across. So I had to make a seam. And so I'm just going to take some of these little bolts and cover up that seam. And I'm just going to take also one of the little screws and put that in there as well. And some of them are just adhered down flat with glue, and I've also used a little bit of foam adhesive as well. And I'm just going to scatter these along the bottom and just finish getting everything glued down and in place so that I can finish up my card. So Now you can just see I have removed everything off of there once I kind of had an idea of where I wanted it. And now I'm just going to go ahead and glue those down and commit. Sometimes it's hard, right? You're like, oh boy, I'm not really sure if I like how, this looks here or whatever. You have to audition it. You have to try it out in the different spots before you glue it down. At least that's how I am anyways. And so now I'm going ahead and just getting everything stuck down now that I have a really great idea of where I want to put it. So you can see my little partying robots here. They're kind of having a lot of fun when they should be working. That was sort of like the whole idea of what I was going for here. Now I'm going to take my Nouveau Glaze and I'm just going to go ahead and go over those light bulbs and give them some dimension. I'm going to give the little middle section of a couple of the robots there where they're colored yellow. I'm going to go over that with a little bit of this Nouveau Glaze as well, and create a little bit of dimension on the robots there as well. And I just love how the glaze just kind of finishes everything off. And I always finish my cards off with some sort of embellishment detail, just because I feel like it really is, kind of gives a whole lot more interest to your card if you do that. This is some Nouveau Crystal Drops in silver lining, and I just love how this goes nicely with the whole silver color scheme of my robots, but it's also going to give them some dimension. And so I'm just going over some of the little connecting sections of the different bots to give those areas a little bit of that lift. So you can just see me there going and adding that in, and just tiny little bits. I'm not gobbing too much of that on there. I'm just giving it a little bit, and it's going to dry nice and dimensional and just look really cool, I think, on the card. So this will take a little bit of time to dry. And now I'm just going to take some of my stickles in Stardust and add that to a little bit of the different little areas here to give it some sparkle. And then I will just off camera just let this all dry, because it does take a bit of time, and I will show you the card when I'm all finished here. So just going ahead, finishing up with those stickles, and my card is going to be finished. Make sure you check the description box below for the links to all of the products that I used today in making this card. Had so much fun creating this. I think this Build-A-Bot stamp set is genius. I love it. I think it's super cool, and I had a blast making this card. It was a lot of fun. So hope you enjoyed this, and have a great day. Thanks so much for stopping by, and I hope to see you another time here on the channel. Bye-bye.